And now, as countries across the Horn of Africa embark on ambitious programs to attract foreign investment, Djibouti, which looked more likely a stable option in a volatile region, is now faced with risk. This is according to a new report by a business risk intelligence firm, EXX Africa. And the report stated that at first sight, Djibouti seems to be an attractive investment destination, but adds that the country's apparent political stability is assured only by the presence of multiple foreign military bases and relatively low exposure to regional security threats.
The authors of this report are also concerned about the political situation in the country, where, according to their observations, the security forces have taken a tough approach to repress opposition activists and their activities. By repressing freedom of expression and political rights, the government has intensified allegiances to unruly factions and increased the prospects of armed insurgency. The lack of clarity on presidential succession also leads to internal rivalries and hampers long-term political prospects.
With us now is Dr. Robert Besseling, an executive at EXX Africa and an analyst on African affairs. Dr. Besseling, as you know, we are reviewing your firm's report on Djibouti. So first off, what importance does the strategic location of Djibouti play in Africa in terms of investment opportunities?
Yeah, the geographic location of Djibouti is very strategic. It controls access to the Red Sea and to the Indian Ocean. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, and therefore Djibouti has been able to really capitalize on its strategic position. And it's been doing that in two different ways. One, it has developed its port sector for the transshipment of goods, for the refueling of vessels, as a free trading zone, right there within that strategic location. And secondly, it has allowed foreign militaries, especially navies and air forces, to establish bases within its territory. So the US, France, China, Japan all have military or naval bases within the jurisdiction of Djibouti.
So, Dr. Besseling, this report says that the presence of multiple military bases and low exposure to security threats is the reason for the stability of Djibouti. Could you please explain more on this?
Yeah, Djibouti at first sight seems like a politically stable country. The last elections were held in 2016, and President Guelleh, who initially said he was not going to run for another term, then actually won his fourth five-year term in office. However, in the past few years, the government has promised political reform negotiations to commence and some sort of an agreement with the opposition to give the opposition further space to operate within Djibouti. And that has not happened. And what we've seen over the past few months is really a fragmentation of the political space in Djibouti, where the opposition has withdrawn from the political process. It boycotted the local elections in February this year. And its supporters are increasingly turning to the streets to protest and to put pressure on the government to return to the negotiating table to cement a political reform agreement. So that is essentially weakening and destabilizing the political outlook for Djibouti at the moment. The political stability that was present in Djibouti 2 years ago has now been weakened substantially.
And also, you describe its political investment potential as being overstated and also unsustainable. All of these obviously don't come across as a good report or optimistic report on Djibouti. But looking at the green side, are you offering any solution? I mean, maybe perhaps diversification as a solution?
Yes, sure. The investment and economic outlook for Djibouti really is based upon trade and military cooperation agreements. And that essentially means that the government in Djibouti has created an economic model which relies almost completely on its port infrastructure and its trade and military cooperation agreements. 80% of GDP is dominated by this particular sector. There are no natural resources and there is no manufacturing base. The lack of diversification of the economy and the lack of liberalizing reforms, they are hampering the growth of the services industry. So therefore, even though Djibouti is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, it achieved a 7% growth rate in terms of GDP growth rate in 2017. The sustainability of this growth needs to be taken into question. As long as the country's economy remains focused only on military cooperation agreements and trading services at its ports, that essentially has led us to the conclusion, which we stated in our recent report in Africa, that the investment and economic outlook for Djibouti is essentially a mirage.
Dr. Robert Besseling, many thanks for sharing your insights there on Djibouti. Principal Africa analyst on business at the business risk intelligence firm, the EXX Africa, Dr. Robert Besseling, speaking to us there from Paris, France, on Djibouti. You're watching the Morning Call right here on Africanews. Do not forget that you can watch this broadcast in English or in French if you are on the CanalSat network. Use the blue button on your remote control to change the settings. And if you're just joining us, and of course you have missed a number of our stories, but you can catch them up on our website, www.africanews.com. Still ahead on the program. Despite a difficult draw for the World Cup in Russia and the injury of his major player, Youssef Masakni, Tunisian coach Nabil Maloul says he is confident the Carthage Eagles will qualify for the second round of the FIFA World Cup. We hear him speak when we return. This plus more when we return after the break. Do not go anywhere.